and empowerment of rural women and girls. Najma Ismail, KTN News.
This morning, NRM's self-proclaimed General Miguna Miguna is back in the news after his dramatic return to the country. Miguna Miguna spent hours at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport where immigration officers denied him entry. Later in the night, the drama became chaotic and violent as armed police officers roughed up the general and bundled him into an aircraft that had been grounded for at least an hour. And all this unfolded right in the eyes of NASA leader Raila Odinga, who was at the airport to secure Miguna's entry. Still this morning, NASA woes are deepening, with Kiminini MP Chris Wamalwa daring ODM to oust him as a deputy chief in the National Assembly. And now a section of Jubilee politicians are uneasy with the Harambee House deal that culminated with handshake. Welcome to The Political Point. And joining me in studio to dissect some of those issues, to my immediate left is Professor George Wajakoya, who is an advocate and a lecturer at USIU. Next to him is Farah Malim, who is the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making the time. I'll start with your comments on the Miguna Miguna saga. I'll start with you, sir. Farah?
I think it's sad. It's very unfortunate. I mean, whereas Miguna could have had some other nationality, we all know that he has roots in this country and his birthright cannot be taken away from him.
Yes.
And I think it was a bad thing to have bundled him the way they have bundled him. Mm-hmm. In any case, it's the same, the courts had already given orders for the reinstatement of his own passport.
Yes.
And when a country does not respect its own the rulings of its own judicial officers, then we are not different from some of the failed states like South Sudan and many others.
All right,
yeah.
Prof.
Kenya has become a dictatorial state, or is in the process of becoming a proper dictatorship. I personally take this with Uhuru Kenyatta, and I'm telling him off. Him as the president, his legacy is just being destroyed, and he has destroyed his legacy on the Miguna issue, where his government can actually refuse to obey court orders in broad daylight. Raila's handshake has become what we call disinfected handshake, which has proved beyond reasonable measures that the two leaders are there for their own stomachs, the two leaders are there for their own good. And if Raila went to the airport yesterday to free Miguna, and the whole drama started, that means Raila went to deport Miguna.
All right, before we go on to Raila, of course, Miguna had his identification card. Wasn't this enough to let him into the country?
Yeah. You see, the mere fact that you have a birthright here,
yes,
it cannot be taken away. Mm-hmm. And then there's a court order. And then we have under the new constitution, we have what's called dual citizenship. And the members in the parliament, they are people in big positions. There are people all over this country here,
yes,
who are holding higher positions in the government, who have that dual citizenship, who went to the West those early days and because of a prolonged stay. And many of them left to go to those countries because of what was the oppression that we had at that time here.
Yes.
Many of them as students, many of them as young graduates, many of them who are involved in the student activism of those days ended up in the West, in America, in the European countries, in Australia, in Canada, and ended up acquiring the citizenship of those countries. But then, of course, you cannot take away their birthright. This is the point. And all of them, without exception, do enjoy that facility right now. They have their Kenyan what they call identity also.
Yes.
So to just fish out Migunas, to refuse to respect the courts, to take out of this country somebody who has a birthright, this marks of the kind of stuff we had in Zambia way back when Kenneth Kaunda, the longest serving president of Zambia, was denied the possibility of running as a presidential candidate because they said he had his roots in Malawi. His grandfather came from Malawi.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the rate things are going right now, somebody could come around and say that maybe your ancestor came from either the Congo forest or from Cameroon, or came from the south where the Ngoni and the Bantus were coming, or say that the Nilotes from the Sudanic side. So you have your troops. I mean, it's preposterous. It's outrageous. It's something that we should never entertain in a civilized, era and period like now, because he's trying to use he might be a vexation to the country. There's no question about that. But that's what democracy is about. Democracy is basically to be able to survive with and live with people who you can't be that happy with them. But to take away the birthright of somebody, push him into a plane when he's saying this is my country, and I don't understand what that captain had in mind. No captain ordinarily would go with that kind of a passenger. I don't know. It must be a KQ flight. Am I right?
No, it was Emirates.
Emirates.
Yes.
Now those guys are thugs also. He must take them to court immediately wherever he is, and maybe in another jurisdiction, because under those circumstances, if you have a hostile passenger, that plane is not supposed to take off, because then you endanger the lives of all the passengers who are on that plane. So I think even the Emirates have erred in a big way.
All right, so what options does he have right now, considering, well, he's been denied entry into the country? If we go back to the court, I mean, the state has already disobeyed court orders. What next for him?
First of all, as an international lawyer, teacher, and also an expert on immigration law, which I've practiced both in UK and US for a very long time, given the fact that I'm very much schooled in that area of law, which many people here have no idea of what it is. Miguna had actually crossed into the international line. When he was found on the other side of the aisle, that means he was in the country legally. Now, how do I dissect this? Number one, it is said that where an entry clearance officer, in which case in this country immigration, allows you to cross from no man's land,
the soil.
Cross from international arena into the Kenyan soil, whether by default or not by default, whether by force or not by force. You cannot be processed unless you're taken back to the court. You can only be deported from the international line. Miguna had already crossed inside the country.
Yes.
And therefore, the only way he could have been deported
is to take him
was through the court.
Subjective, yes.
That's number one. Number two,
yes, indeed.
Okay.
Number two, as Malim has said here, according to international aviation laws or airspace laws, no carrier is allowed. No carrier is allowed, and in this case, the captain of the carrier is allowed to admit on board a drunken passenger, hostile passenger, or even a sick passenger without being accompanied by a doctor, or any other person who has got a contagious disease, or a person who was of that particular disposition, as we saw yesterday, his argument.
Yeah.
Because you are putting the passengers' lives at risk on board. Immediately that airline is grounded. And if I'm going to see Harvey, immediately I finish here. If possible, you're going to take the Emirates to court because they violated the IOTA regulations, international regulations. Number three, the Kenya government, and Matiang'i included, and I'm going to tell him off, I don't care what he'll do to me. Matiang'i has become one of the most useless ministers in Africa because of his proclamation. Look at what he's doing today, and I'm being personal here. A minister who can come out from Harambee House to go and destroy Chang'aa and local brew. A minister who can actually refuse Mr. Miguna, deport a Kenyan who had an ID card, and refused to do that. The Director of Intelligence, equally, I'm not sparing him, for misadvising the government, misadvising the president. These guys ought to go. Director of Intelligence should go home. The Minister for Internal Security should go home. And I'm asking the American government and the British government to deny these two visas.
All right, when Raila Odinga got to the airport, we expected that now Miguna Miguna will be let free. But then this didn't happen, which questions the handshake, the pact that he had with President Uhuru Kenyatta.
This might sound as a bit outrageous to people who have so much faith in Raila.
Okay.
But the truth of the matter is that that handshake is nothing more than a personal interest of Raila himself. And we will see as it unfolds. As time goes on, we're going to see these things. Because I was in a meeting, actually. I'm also the deputy party leader for Wiper.
Yes.
I was in a meeting, a PG meeting in our own headquarters there in Wiper House. And Raila addressed us in that way, that place. And he said he was offered 5 billion shillings to drop the quest. Mm-hmm. And then was offered 10 billion. And then was offered 15 billion. Then was offered 20 billion. Escalated up to 25 billion. You can see in 5 billion tranches progressively.
Yes.
And that he refused that to sell off the costs, basically, the NASA costs at that time. The big question that I was inclined to ask him is that if you want to buy this cap from me now for 100 shillings, and I tell you that this cap is not for sale, then you would not escalate it to 120 or to 200 or to 300.
Yeah.
For you to keep on escalating all the way to 25 billion, there must have been a counter demand. And maybe at that stage they say, now take it or leave it. What was he asking for? 50 billion, 100 billion, 30 billion? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why would they move from one to the other, to the other, to the other, if there was no a counter demand? Mm. Let me tell you, it's a bit sad. This country has been taken for a ride by the political class from the opposition, from where I came from myself for the last 30 years.
Yes.
For far too long. And everything revolved around transaction, commercial transaction of politics itself. Nothing else. It's been a commercial transaction of politics. That's why we kept on building one coalition after the other, one coalition after the other. And whereas people think that during our tenure, myself included, and Raila's leadership in the opposition circles, that we might have achieved a lot in terms of reforms, we've achieved nothing. We are worse off today than we were in 1992. In 1992, what happened to Miguna would not have happened. Let me be honest with you. Mm-hmm. With all the verifications we did on him, Moi was a sage who did understand that there is a country that is going to be there long after he's gone. So towards the end, he clearly, even during his rule, other than that very powerful instinct to protect his office as a president, for the rest of the other reforms, things were not going that bad. Today, you can have no qualification and become a governor in any county in this country. You can be a criminal and still be there. You can be a drug dealer and become. You can become anything in this country, provided you have the money. And I think that we contributed to it ourselves, because what we have perfected is the art of. We see a genuine quest by Kenyans, by the ordinary Kenyans, for a certain change, for a certain reform. We as the politicians will now run in front of them, pick up that thing with a lot of passion and run with it. Give a lot of hope to Kenyans. And just about the time when it is supposed to mature, we transact it, so we go back to zero again.
Yes.
You get my point?
Yeah.
We go back to zero again. You can have the Kibaki Tosha, the KANU NDP, what do you call, Corporation of 1998, the Atam Kiapia Nyama. When Kofi Annan called me after that bit, when we had an opportunity to put this country on a pedestal, on a certain constitutional, what do you call, stability, administrative and governance stability that was going to survive for decades, if not centuries, we lost it. Because then Raila and Kibaki cut a deal. He left here with a helicopter, went to Sagana, and came back and said, Hatam Kia Pia Nyama. Because at that time, the idea was that Kibaki would pick a cabinet position, Raila would pick another one.
Yeah.
Kibaki picks another one, all of them. So that there's such a powerful balance in the country that we're going to put up a system that essentially is balanced also. But when you don't have that balance, because Kibaki picked everything that was of value.
Yeah.
And what did he give to Raila for him to allow that? The rest of the Pentagon were convinced that he transacted this with money, and basically that's why they all left. They all left. Each one of them decided, now I might as well go and do my business somewhere else. Where is the Pentagon of 2008? Where is Balala? Where is Ruto? Where is Joe Nyaga? Where is Mudavadi? He came back again much later.
Yes.
Where are all those guys? They left because they felt cheated. And now we have a similar one. Here is NASA coalition. NASA coalition was supposed to sit together and seek genuine reforms for the country, not selfish interests of the leadership of NASA itself. Those reforms are not there. They never negotiated. This handshake is nothing beyond the handshake, and whatever the two people agreed, and whatever was transacted has been transacted. There's not going to be a coalition government, by the way, let me tell you.
Yes.
Hakuna Nusumkate. In any case, I don't see it serving any purpose. The idea of Nusumkate before was so that you have two powerful forces that counterbalance one another, and then they settle now on creating institutions. Because none of them can push the other one. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But that's not there anymore.
So then how do we salvage the country, Prof?
I think the Railas and the Uhurus, the Raila should actually retire and should retire immediately. We've had these sagas for a very long time. Raila and Ruto do not like wise men around them. They don't like anyone who is very intelligent. They like people who they can use and dump, or people who can sing their songs, not me in person. I'll never do that. If you look at Raila's history, and I've actually lived and actually became a surrogate to him when he was in London, so was his father. I came to realize that this is one man who will use you and dump you. And if you are very intelligent, he will not want to be near you. I'm sorry, Maalim, but this is the truth. So is the deputy president. They like people they can use, people who can sing their music, and people who can come up and sing what have you. We need Raila out of this picture. Let him retire peacefully as a statesman, and the world will actually look at him as a leader. This issue of him cajoling, like what he has done to Wetangula, even if Wetangula was as bad as an animal, him being a father, him shaking a hand of the president, he also ought to have shaken the hand of Wetangula, and he should have said, look, I'm a father, all of you are my children, even if you have wronged me or somebody else, please. I'm also castigating James Orengo as a very selfish senator. He ought also to have said no. As a matter of principle, I am not going to take this. Why would you be laughing today and then tomorrow you turn out to be a hypocrite? So the only solution we have in this country is to entirely have a new group of leaders, crop of leaders, all these shenanigans, all this old yoke, all this worshipping kind of mentality, all this issue of because I'm a Luo, I have to support Raila, or because I'm a Luo, I have to support Mudavadi, has to go. We need an entirely new break, and we need new leadership in this country.
All right. So, of course, you said we are worse now than we were then.
By far.
So, is NASA still in the same path towards transformation?
There is a possibility that there will be some salvaging. If the three other principles can come together and bring in powerful dose of reformists. Because they cannot entirely claim to be reformists even themselves.
Yeah.
They are part of the old conservative, what they call ilk. So there is need to bring in fresh minds into that. And then use that one right now as a pedestal. So try and begin now discussing issues in this country. Issues, we never discuss issues. I remember one time when Raila went out of the country and we built up Baba while you were away. And the whole idea was that there were too many bad things that were happening in the country. And I actually told my friends, Wetangula and others included, and they were shocked. They didn't believe it, and they just couldn't understand why I said, look, now that Raila has come back, this cause is lost. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Because the idea was that we'll come back together, pick up on one or two issues that are of paramount importance to Kenyans, force the country into some kind of a referendum. You see what I mean? And get a certain constitutional changes in the country itself. Because we had seen where the imperfections of the new constitution was. But what did we do? We built that to frenzy. We took it there, literally the way you take over if you're if you're a business expert, and I've done some business myself, I have an MBA, when you have a problem with a company that's not performing, and you turn it around, and the share prices begin picking up,
yes,
and you bring in new ideas and new products into that line, it reaches a certain optimum that it can't develop any more than that. So you set it off that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You divest from there and move on and do something else. Now, that's exactly how we have transacted politics. We wait until we're able to build a passionate cause for the common Kenyans into that frenzy, just about the time when it's supposed to mature, and the Kenyans will now begin reaping the benefits, enjoying the benefits. We as politicians set it off like that, dysfunctional, what do you call it, company, and then we wait for another opportunity again.
Okay.
You get my point?
Yes.
That's why we have to one coalition after the other, one clarion call after the other. Every 5 years, every 2 years, every 3 years, we have something. Nowadays, it's electoral injustice. We have known electoral injustices were there from the word go.
Yes.
We should have done it in a manner that essential. And what happened? We could have collected 4 million signatures in less than 3 months. It took us a whole 3 years. And by the time we came up with them, they were even less than 1 million, what do you call signatures. What happened? My presumption is that the moment that thing reached that crescendo, the people in the establishment who know us, by the way,
so how
they know that the politicians in the opposition can be easily be sold or bought.
Yes.
So they must have called in and said, now, cool it off, and basically, this settle for this. And then what happens? You play your own games with that. You jam the thing with 15 issues, 16 issues, and 1 year before the elections, now you begin again getting Kenyans killed in the streets because you're calling for the IEBC to go because the numbers for those what do you call signatures are not there.
Yes.
Why should there be what do you call issues or contestations on 1 million votes? Raila had 6 million votes, I think, in the 20, and what was it, 5-point-something million votes at least. We could easily put together 4 million votes, which is 4 times what you needed to force a referendum in the country.
All right.
You understand my point?
Yes.
But we don't do it. We have perfected, the opposition in this country has perfected the commercialization of politics. And we do it every now and again. Now is the time when I think many of us, like myself, have decided I'm going to talk about this, because I've lived with this for all these years and tried to get a change. No.
All right. All right, we want to take a